Hello and welcome to today's video where I'm going to be interviewing Raycevick. Go ahead and say hello and give it an introduction of yourself as well.
Well, I'll say hello because that part's easy, but give an introduction to myself. I don't really consider myself particularly interesting, but hi, my name is Raycevick, like he said. I do YouTube gaming videos, I guess. I don't know about you, but like I always hesitate at the word essay because essay is something that I never really did in school very much, and like I guess it kind of puts you in like sort of a genre of YouTube now.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you make gaming video essays.
I guess that's probably the closest thing I'd fall into. I've never really sat down and thought about what's my genre, what's my specific take. I kind of just do my thing and hope that it works, and so far it seems to at the moment.
Because, I mean, when I hear gaming videos, I just think of PewDiePie Amnesia Let's Play.
Yeah, no, that's what I think about when I think of gaming videos, because, I mean, that's what's dominating the YouTube charts. I mean, occasionally you'll see something, mainly in film, you'll see something like Every Frame a Painting video or whatever get to the top there, but, you know, very rarely do you see in the gaming circle an essay in particular be the thing that's dominating YouTube's attention.
Yeah, I mean, because, like, you know, people's attention span is like 5 seconds.
Well, also they want something, more relatable. They don't want, a dumb blonde twerp like me telling them, about like the fucking backstory of Valve, back in the 90s. They want to see the latest and greatest game that's out right now, played by their favorite personality that they can relate to.
Yeah, I mean, Twitch streaming is taking over now as well.
I think that's probably a big part of that. I think sort of Twitch streaming is that's sort of like Let's Plays part 2. That's kind of like the evolution of Let's Plays almost, because I mean, a lot of times people aren't even really particularly that interested in the game. In the case of Let's Plays, there's a lot of people that watch people play Amnesia and never touched it in their entire lives.
Yeah, I mean, I've never played it, but I'd watch PewDiePie's videos on it.
Yeah. And I did the same thing for years and years too.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess streaming is just Let's Plays for people with a long attention span.
Yeah, it's something that, doesn't really fit my personal desires for viewing, because I typically don't want, long stretches of just things going on that build up to, because I think what people value in streams are the personal moments that they get to see live in an unfold. To them, that's worth like the half an hour to 40 minutes or whatever of just stuff. I was always kind of thinking of like people sort of use streaming as like how some people use a background song or radio, or it's something that they kind of just tune into every once in a while, and then when it's not immediately grabbing their attention, they kind of just let go in the background and sort of just has this noise.
Yeah, that's like the thing with podcasts and all of that. You just have them playing in the background while you're doing something else. Speaking of being a blonde twerp, when I first saw your face, Raycevick,
yeah,
I was like, fucking hell, the face does not match the voice at all.
That is not the first time I've gotten that. It's something that even kind of talked about with back when I was at university, kind of thing of, people would joke saying like, hey, you should start off like using a dramatic tone and then just show like, hey, here's a 20 something just here to tell you about how fucking movies work. Yeah, and I understand that, and my attitude to showing my face or whatever is the kind of thing where I don't show my videos because I don't think it matters. It's not even a case of I'm particularly shy. Like, people can Google and find it if they really want to, but I don't see why. It's not particularly interesting. It's not particularly notable. And in terms of my content, I just currently, I don't really see the need to add live action bits, whatever. I've had ideas of it and stuff like that in the future, if I were to, rise up, get a larger budget or whatever. But the risk that you run with that is, I think of the amount of YouTubers that I've watched that when they up their production actually got better. And, it's a real challenge. There's a lot of channels back in the smaller days, especially, that, they get a brand new microphone even. And that kind of changed their entire persona, especially one that's more comedic or more exaggerated. It feels weird to give them an expensive microphone instead of just a cheap headset, because a cheap headset kind of gives it some charm. It kind of makes it more like I said, a lot of YouTube is based on relatability. And when someone has a funny rant or something like that, it's more relatable to be heard over a crappy microphone in a codec call than with an expensive studio booth microphone. Like, I think the reason, I guess, using a sort of more, I don't want to say professional because it sounds pretentious, but I guess sort of like a more conservative tone in my videos. I think it just sort of fits the content. You know, I'm not really ranting. I'm not all that angry. I'm more dissecting stuff. And that kind of environment is better suited to using a narration tone or using a non-headset microphone kind of thing.
Yeah, a sexy mic. Yeah.
Yes, a sexy old microphone that's been locked up in my fucking room for 10 years.
What mic is it? I'm curious.
I'm currently using an AT2020 USB that I've used for some time. This dates back to when I was doing much different content back in the day.
Oh, I thought it would be an XLR microphone.
I want to use an XLR microphone. I've got 2 of them, but I have got a mixer, and being the idiot that I am, I have no idea how to use it. It doesn't even have a USB port, so that's what makes it confusing. One of these days I'll get it set up, but it was given to me by a very dear friend of mine, so I do want to at least set it up at some point.
Yeah, I used to have a USB mixer because I have the AT2020, but XLR version. Right now, I just have it hooked up to a USB converter. Because when I used mixers, the problem was that I'd keep turning up the gain a whole lot.
Yeah, there's turning up the gain, there's all the variables. Honestly, kind of a reason I just wanted is just because it has an effects filter, and I would so want to use that in calls.
Oh, yeah. I didn't have one that had like effects on it. It was just, you know, a gain knob, and that's it, really. Yeah, like one of the basic ones. Yeah, but I mean, I think one time I looked up Raycevick on Google, and your LinkedIn profile came up.
Yeah, my ancient LinkedIn profile that I haven't updated in ages. I don't even know if I put in, you know, that I am working. I'm not sure if I've even updated it at this point.
I don't know. I think the last time you updated it was like 2 years ago.
That sounds about right, because that's about when all of this started, getting into YouTube.
Yeah, and then I saw the picture, and I'm like, no way, this cannot be him.
My favorite thing about that is there's a little cameo appearance in Shammy's No Man's Sky video where he got basically parody versions of a whole bunch of different YouTubers, and I got thrown in there with and I contributed to it because I was happy to, you know, mock myself there. And he turned it into, he named the account Raycevick, and it's my LinkedIn profile picture, but with like a really generic, angry, you know, YouTube comment sort of thing. And I love that contrast that he brought to it.
I don't think I noticed that when I was watching that video.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff there. The thing with Shammy's content is that he's one of those people that's like, he will go like, hey, did you notice this, notice this, notice this? And you're like, no.
He just throws in like a bunch of Easter eggs in there for you to find.
He has so many Easter eggs in his content. Like there are times where there was one time he messaged me that basically just went the equivalent of help. I'm going way over detailed on this.
Yeah, I've heard he's a bit of a psychopath when it comes to video making.
I'm sure he'll be the first one to admit that.
So first question for you here, Lucas, is when did you get started with YouTube?
I've been doing YouTube on and off for about 10 years. But in terms of what I do now, that began about 2 years ago. And it's rather funny because I was on this website called Connected at the time, and I just out of nowhere felt like doing a Halo retrospective, because what I was seeing at that time was a lot of ranting against Halo 4 and 5. Now, don't get me wrong, a lot of that was quite justified, Halo 5's campaign in particular. But what I was seeing quite a bit was sort of the attitude of, why don't you just go back to Halo 1 and 2? Those games were perfect. And while I think something like, especially recently with El Dorito, I think has proved the viability and the desire for that type of game, I think it's always wrong to look back to the past and say that was perfect, let's just do that, because to me then you're never going to advance. And I mean, it's a kind of thing where even if something is done better in the past, why not improve further upon that? Why just go back to 2001 and then say, okay, let's just never go forward again? I feel like you could take the advantages and the stuff that was better in the past and improve upon it even more. And so that was kind of what sparked the desire to go back to Halo 1, 2, and 3 and all those games and kind of look at them with a more critical perspective. I have things about those videos I'm not satisfied with, because that was when I had this odd mindset of trying to be objective and trying to say like, oh, this is, you know, rational, and I'm trying to, you know, make it even, stuff like that. I am still pleased that of the stuff that I brought up that I think people were, you know, willing to admit with the Halo games. Or the thing that irritates me with those videos in particular is the try to make them objective. Because something that I feel like I've learned since then is the benefit of subjectivity and sort of the value in subjectivity, because that is something that, like, that kind of ties into what I was saying earlier, is a lot more relatable. You know, everyone has, you know, their subjective views. So my goal today these with modern videos isn't so much to try to get people to have the same opinion as me, but to just understand my perspective. And these days, I don't really, I don't really concern myself at all with whether or not someone agrees with me. What I want is for a viewer to have a different perspective that helps inform their own, and they come away with that.
Yeah, it's fine to have an opinion, Lucas. You won't be killed for your opinion.
Yeah. The internet would like to contest that at times, but no, but that's what I mean though, is I'm glad that because I think I was not really at all satisfied with my content until I would say probably the Mass Effect 2 or 3 video. That's when I started to when I'd finished a video and not want to immediately change it within a couple days of posting, because it was really satisfying with that video in particular to see people go, Mass Effect 3 has pissed me off whenever I think about it for all these years, and they say that because I now see this perspective, now like I can move on. And that was really satisfying for me. That was a really positive takeaway to get from finishing that.
And why'd you start YouTube, Lucas? What got you into it?
I think what got me into YouTube is how independent it is. Because for everything else that you want to do, you need something else. Like even if you want to write a novel, which is probably the most sort of, when it comes to novels, it's like, one person can just write a book. You don't need a crew. You don't need permission for rights. You don't need this and this and that. Anyone can just sit down and write a novel. But then you have to get to publishing, where you're going to have to work through probably at least half a dozen people. And then you're gonna have to get an editor, and then you're gonna have to get a long release date, and you're probably gonna have to make changes because it doesn't fit the publisher's desires. And then you have to get a category, a marketing campaign, and all this type of stuff. YouTube doesn't even have any of that, at least in certain circles. There's networks and stuff like that, but I've never really been, because of my journey through YouTube over these 10 years, I've sort of realized the value in being a one-man show, both creatively and from how people view your content. And because I went through the phase of working for a channel and getting content onto Machinima Respawn, because back in 09 and 010, that was the big thing, was getting on that channel. And I kind of realized that it wasn't all it was cracked up to be when you get up there.
Yeah, Machinima bad.
Because what people saw with Machinima Respawn was the Scene Anners and the Hutches and the Sarks, and they didn't, and at least for me, I didn't fully grasp that those were people that were fully involved with Machinima. Like those were individual employees of Machinima. They were not contractors. They were not, people that were just throwing their videos up there. They were ingrained in that culture. And getting your videos posted on there did not put you alongside them. It did not give you a higher status or anything like that. It's just, oh, hey, your video has now got a couple thousand more views than before. It's the sort of thing I learned where if a video has 50,000 more views, but no one really cares, then that 50,000 views doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you want people that watch your video to care about it.
Yeah, you want people to, I get a kick out of, the occasional, angry comment I get or whatever. To me, what hurts a lot more is when people are indifferent. And like I said, that was something that, I kind of learned from having videos on Machinima Respawn for a brief period.
Yeah. And, I was partnered with Machinima on my old channel, and their contract was just shit.
Yeah, and that was the thing I was glad I didn't deal with directly, because, I was through a channel. So I wasn't the one that was having to deal with the contracts and all that conversation. And yeah, there's a lot of people that got negatively affected by that, to say the least, in terms of what they did.
And is YouTube your full-time job currently?
Yeah, it's the thing that I'm mainly focused on right now. It's the thing that I sort of live and breathe. I don't do part-time work. I don't have a second job. It's the thing that I rely upon right now. And the thing about it is because the job that I had before, it was easy, like the easiest gig in the entire world, but it didn't challenge. And I think that's probably another thing that's appealing about YouTube, is it can generate quite a bit of fear and anxiety at times, but in some ways that's sort of the creative thrill of it all, is the satisfaction that you get from at one moment fearing that this is going to be the last video you ever make because you have no ideas left, and your rent's coming up, your payments are coming up, there's no big check coming down the road and all that type of stuff. And then a week later having a piece of content that you're proud of. That's a really satisfying journey to be on. That is probably I notice that every single time I get to the end of a project where I've stayed up like 16 hours and I'm basically dead at my desk, that when I finish my timeline and there is literally nothing else to add, I just go, damn it. And because it's really satisfying to get to that point, as frustrating as the journey can be at times.
I mean, the only thing about YouTube being a job is just the unreliability of it.
Yeah, there's the unreliability of it, and that's the thing of it is, I mean, because I did YouTube on and off for years, without it being my job. And now that it is a job, it doesn't feel like a job. But the only real difference is that now there's just pressure to it that wasn't there. I feel like that's the thing I didn't value when I was starting out. And something I always advise to smaller channels is to take their advantage of being able to do whatever they want, because I mean, I've got quite a bit of freedom. I'm not tied to a specific game to cover. I'm not tied to a specific company. I'm not tied to anybody, in fact. But there's still an expectation. There's still an expectation of having an occasional years later video. There's still an expectation of having a bar of quality that you meet. There's still of, at least trying to get 2 videos out each month. There are expectations there and things that you need to follow. And you don't have any of those when you're starting out. And that's something that I always try to advise smaller channels to really take advantage of, because it's something you're going to miss when that's gone.
Someone my size is definitely way more relaxed than someone your size. Have you had any channels before this one, or is this your first ever YouTube channel?
I had 2 channels, if I remember correctly, beforehand. Well, I guess I had like a couple extras and stuff like that, but I had 2 that I had in the past, and only one of which kind of got some sort of footing for a little bit. I had 1,000 subscribers at one point, and that was a big deal, and I made a celebration video about it and stuff like that, and I was on this small time network. It's funny you mentioned PewDiePie at the beginning, actually, because I was on probably, I guess you'd call it a big break, but I just find that word's kind of giving it too much credit. But I guess like my biggest opportunity I had before this was there was a channel called GXPTube that had, by the end of it, we had about 15,000 subscribers. When I came on, we had about 6,000. So that was actually a pretty big jump. I was on there for about a year. So, for us, getting a channel from 6,000 to 15,000 was huge. And especially because this was around 2009, 2010. And, there weren't 50, we didn't have the Ruby. We didn't have the Ruby play button at this stage. We were far, far away from that at the time. So we all thought it was a big deal. And on this channel at some point, the people that we had on there was myself. I was the sort of the reviewer of the channel. I was doing kind of GameSpot, IGN style coverage there. We had my buddy, Puppy Exorcist at the time, who's now Nivivorous, who's now New Wave. He's doing work and I still talk to him. There was a Gaming Leopard, I want to say. I feel so bad for forgetting his name, but we had like 5 people on there, and one of the other commentators on there was PewDiePie. And it was funny because I remember seeing his first ever video on Machinima Respawn, because he went through our network, Vostro Media, if I remember correctly. And he was at about 600 subscribers. And I remember he began his first ever video saying that, hey, I'm a Swedish YouTuber, but I'm not that other big Swedish YouTuber, because at the time it was Taves. Taves was the big European COD player at the time, and how things have changed over this brief period of time. And yeah, and he came onto our channel as a commentator, and it was kind of funny sort of crossing paths like that. And the thing that I remember is that I was there for when his Amnesia content in particular exploded, because that was through our little side company, Vostro Media, that got posted.
So you met PewDiePie in real life?
No, it was just I don't even think I even have a conversation with him. It was just a case of we just happened to sort of be at the same network around the same time. And yeah, it was pretty interesting, because after GXP got closed down, because there was I think only other content creators could probably relate to this, is that in 2009, 2010, there was a big shift in YouTube subscription feed, where there was sort of like this big exodus, and basically anybody that had a channel below 25,000 views couldn't seem to get coverage. Because what YouTube used to have was, it used to have a dedicated tab that was for channels that were 50,000 subscribers or below that it would advertise. And once it got rid of that, there was this big sort of hit where anyone below 25,000 subs couldn't get a view count to save their life. And we were hit in terms of, we went from an average of 10,000 views to barely hitting 1,000 out of nowhere.
Oh, rest in peace.
Yeah. And so I was bitter. I was angry. I was 16 years old. I've had my dreams crushed or whatever the hell. And I was really naive at the time. And It's one of those things that I look back on now and I'm sort of like, for as frustrated as I was then, I wasn't ready for it. And it kind of rubs salt in the wound at the time of when I was out of YouTube for that year. And then I hear from a friend of mine, hey, I did some fan art for PewDiePie. And I'm like, PewDiePie, what? Like the PewDiePie from the channel that I was on? Okay. Oh, I haven't seen his content. What's he doing? Holy shit, fuck. He's had 5 million subscribers. Because for the moment that he went from, I'd say 100,000 to 5 million, I was completely out of the loop. I had no clue what happened there. I was completely unaware of that growth. And it was rather amusing to look back on.
If only you would have became friends with him.
I don't envy his position personally today in terms of, anyone would love to have the money that he gets, but in terms of the content he'd have to produce and that amount of exposure, because I like where my channel is at right now. I don't feel like an e-celeb. I don't feel like, everywhere I go, people are just there following me in comments. I still feel like kind of how I was before. But the channel's basically big enough to get some exposure, but small enough to still have some relation with the audience. There's enough there to talk to people. There's enough, time to sit down with people like you and just discuss things. It's kind of amusing, actually. There's a sort of behavior I notice with certain commenters where they will comment stuff thinking there's no way the content creator will respond, because they kind of put the creator on sort of like this sort of invisible glass ceiling, because it's like, oh, he's got 100,000 subscribers, so there's no way he'd talk to me. And the thing I notice is they'll begin with a comment that's really aggressive, and then when you respond to them, suddenly they're a lot more calm, and they're a lot more sort of rational and, sort of more in line with what you would expect with a regular conversation instead of internet, I don't know, chauvinism, exaggeration, I don't even know what you'd call it.
Yeah, I guess we kind of just hold you guys at like a pedestal, I guess.
In certain degrees, yeah, I think so. And it's something that I kind of try to shut down whenever I can, because that is the opposite of empathy and relatability. It's the opposite of being able to relate to other people. I consider myself to be more of a YouTube viewer than a content creator. So, I leave comments on videos that I like, and I leave, a trail and stuff like that. And I try to just behave as much as a normal person as I can, to the degree that I can, to the extent that I always have, I feel like.
Yeah, I'm sure when you leave like a comment on the video or something, people probably recognize you though.
There's like, yeah, it happens on occasion, and that's cool, don't get me wrong. Like, it's always, I don't see, some people get frustrated by that. I personally don't. I think it's awesome to, comment on another gaming channel and see people say, hey, they recognize and appreciate your content and that kind of thing. And I think that's totally fine.
I have a question, Lucas. Is your last name Raycevick?
Yes, yeah, I know. It's a lot of people think it's gibberish. And that's because it kind of is. Because when you previously, when you type in Raycevick into YouTube, it would just it would pull spell checker on your ass and just be like, nuh-uh, that doesn't exist. But, it's been my name since birth. And I have, family members who are also named Raycevick. So, but it's just, it's basically a name that stems from Raycevick instead. And someone in my family just didn't like that H. That H, I guess, murdered his family or something like that, and just changed it to a K. And even though it was gibberish and it wasn't technically correct, that's just been my name since then.
Yeah, Raycevick sounds better than Raycevick.
I think it's like something you need with like a sort of Eastern European, staccato. You need like Raycevick or something like that, kind of more with a sort of Eastern accent, I guess. But I was honestly debating to call my channel, the debate on my channel when I was starting it was whether to call it Raycevick or to call it Craven. Because shockingly, there's no big gaming YouTube channel called Craven. And the thing that I love about the name Craven is that, to me, it's ridiculous. It's sort of like an 80s cop show, like this week on Craven. And that you could have kind of rolled with that. The only reason I didn't go through with that is because there were a couple like small channels that were named Craven. And the thing with that is whenever you're starting a channel, you want a name that when you type it in, it doesn't get mixed up with anything else. That kind of goes for anything, whether you're a band, whether you're a person, whether you're a porn star. You want a name that's distinctive. And I kind of knew that, hey, considering that when I currently type in Raycevick on Google, literally nothing else shows up, I think I'll roll with that.
Yeah, I mean, when you search up Champy on YouTube, it always tells you, did you mean shampoo?
Yeah, exactly. When I had my old name Canadian, when you type that in, it'd say you mean Canadian, and I'm like, no, and that kind of dooms that alone, because to any normal person, that's the kind of thing that sort of search. It only works when you're there to instruct. Me as a common person is not going to notice, hey, no, that's actually, it's autocorrecting or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, when I think of Kraven, I think of Kraven the Hunter from Spider-Man.
Yeah, you don't think of, a gaming nerd who's gonna fucking sit down for an hour to, talk about video games.
And Lucas, when did you get into gaming and why?
I was 4 or 5 years old, I want to say. And it's kind of funny because of sort of my most recent video I'm currently working on kind of touches upon this just a little bit. But I started off with a PlayStation because my dad was against video games for years. Like, he thought they were just shit because, he grew up with the Ataris and the Nintendos and stuff like that. And he thought they were just garbage until the PlayStation 1 came out and it had Gran Turismo. And that was the thing that, because he loved cars. I loved cars when I was a kid. I still do, even though I don't have a driver's license. And he bought that. And I played Gran Turismo 2 in particular. I played that to death. I think I maxed out 2 memory cards on that game. I went through probably about 6 or 7 different steering wheel controllers because they were shit and they were fucking easy to break. But yeah, no, that was my introduction. My entire childhood mostly consisted of driving games on the PlayStation, with kind of like the occasional platformer at a friend's house who had an N64 or whatever.
Yeah, I had an N64 at the age of like 4 or 3 years old.
Yeah, I had a PlayStation. All my friends had N64, so I didn't really feel encouraged at that time to beg my mom and dad for that console.
I had a PS2, but never a PS1, and a PS3 and PS4.
Yeah, God, like, what? I'm not sure if you can relate to this, but for me, when the PS2 came out, like, that blew my fucking mind. That was like, oh my God, the graphics, they look so amazing. They look real. It looks photoreal. You look back at it now and you see like the club fists and the faces that don't have any bones and all that type of stuff. But at the time, that was mind-blowing. The jump from PlayStation 1 to PS2 was a thing to behold as a child.
I can't really relate, Lucas, because when I got a PS2, I was like 5 years old. And you're probably like a good, I don't know how many years older than me you are, but probably like...
Well, I was about, I'd say 5-6 years old when I got a PlayStation 2. I'd say probably around there. Might have been 6. I think I was 6 years old, yeah, when we got it.
Oh, okay. How old are you right now, Lucas?
I'm 23.
Oh, okay, then... All right, you are 8 years older than me. It wasn't really mind-blowing for me because I guess it was like my first ever console besides the N64. I mean, I guess when it really blew my mind was probably when I went from the older consoles like PS2 and Wii and all of those to like Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I remember that same jump was huge as well in terms of... Yeah, because like I remember looking at, I mean, like they were getting like almost sort of ridiculous at that point when they're talking about like, look at this basketball player's sweat and that kind of stuff. Like that was trying to sell some consoles. But yeah, like that kind of stuff was mind blowing too. And I remember looking at stuff like Oblivion on the 360 and just never seeing anything like that on a console before. And then you play it now and it's just like there are times where I honestly like I boot up, I get out of the cave today and I think like have the textures loaded? Like I'm waiting for this to get, oh no, this is actually just how it was. Oh, okay.
Yeah, because we're so used to the PC Master Race nowadays.
Yeah, PC Master Race, people complaining about not having 60 FPS on consoles, which is totally, a valid complaint. I agree with it. I think that's something that should have been a standard.
Yeah, I mean, it's a shame that we're only locked to 30 FPS on consoles.
Yeah, a lot of the time because they have to push the fidelity at all costs.
I haven't played a console in years. I haven't owned one in years.
I mean, I have both consoles, but it took me a lot longer than the last generations to get a hold of either.
You have an Xbone and a PS4?
Yep, I've got a PS4 and all I've done with it so far is capture Warframe footage for it. Like, that's it. I've had an Xbox One since Titanfall came out, but then it just became a Halo box and then a Call of Duty box, and that's about it.
You don't have a Switch?
Nope. And the thing with Nintendo consoles is that they're always those things that there's a repeated pattern where you get a couple of the first party games that come out that are really good. You don't touch the thing because then there's just a bunch of crap and shovelware. And then by the time you want to buy another game for it, the console either gets canceled like the Wii U, or there's a new version of it like the 3DS that then makes the old version obsolete, and then you feel like a piece of crap. So I'm kind of just waiting for the Switch to either we're going to get a new version that's going to be better, or it's going to get canned. But the way it's looking, it's probably going to be the former.
Yeah, I mean, because like they had a 3DS and a 2DS and 2DS XL and
Yeah, exactly. And the thing that was really shitty in particular was when I believe one of the new versions of the 3DS made it so that you couldn't even play certain games on the virtual console. So you can, like Super Metroid, you can play that on an Android phone, but you can't play that on certain models of the 3DS. You have to get their fucking brand spanking new model to play that stuff. It's Nintendo makes some great games, but they're just like any other company where I feel like a lot of times they don't get called out on shit like that often enough.
they're just sellouts, really.
Whereas it's just like, it's more like, I mean, it's business. It's just shitty business that's of no benefit to the consumer at that point.
Yeah, I mean, it's ridiculous. Like, I hated the fact that they would make XLs when it's literally the same damn console, but bigger. That's all it is.
Yeah, and I mean, like, these are like the 3DS is not a good piece of technology because of its fidelity or its fucking screen size. It's a good piece of technology because of its features and its compatibility and all that type of stuff. Like, it's not, I don't sit there and go like, yo, I would enjoy my 3DS, but the screen's not quite big enough. I need to see more of the N64 graphics that are totally HD.
And I mean, I never used the 3D feature on the 3DS because it was terrible.
No, that's handheld gaming is something that I haven't. I mean, I don't want to say too much on that subject just because handheld gaming is something that I kind of fell out of. The PSP was the last handheld system that I owned. That didn't really get used very much after a certain point, and same thing with the DS.
I never had a PS Vita or a PSP or anything like that, but I had a Nintendo DS, Nintendo 3DS, and I think that's it, really.
Yeah, like, I mean, I think in terms of technology, I think like stuff like the PlayStation Vita is an incredible piece of tech. Like, it's phenomenal in terms of how much horsepower they're able to squeeze out of such a small device and all of its potential. But at the end of the day, I think when people are on the go, they just want something easy to consume. They don't want a full console-like experience when they're just on the train for a couple minutes. And even if they do, we now have things that are for that. We've now got stuff like the Switch. We don't need, a dedicated handheld console anymore for that market. Because, I mean, I don't know about you, but me personally, I only want to play big games when I'm at home, when I've got my big TV or when I've got my dedicated computer or something like that. I don't want to play a crappier version of it on the go.
Yeah, I can agree with that. And then, of course, we've got mobile games, but most of them are shit.
Yeah, there's good mobile content, but yeah, I mean, that's because of how much it invites free-to-play games and how much it invites smaller developers and stuff like that. There's going to be a lot of shovelware. And the challenge for mobile gamers isn't that there's a lack of good games on there, it's having to find the damn things. I mean, I'm glad that there's some stuff that came out, like the Hitman Go is the thing that comes to my mind. Like, that's a really good example of a dedicated mobile game that takes advantage of both its format and its context.
I never played that, actually.
I would highly recommend it if it ever goes on sale. Any of the Go games, Hitman, Lara Croft, or Deus Ex, are all pretty high quality.
I saw the graphics of those games and they look really good, but I never got them because I don't ever play on my phone.
Yeah, exactly. It's the kind of thing where, for certain consumers, it's just not going to be something that is going to fit within their desired experiences while on the go. Like when I'm walking around, I typically use that time to listen to albums or, playlists or stuff like that. I don't really go to games.
Out of all the games you've played in your entire life, Lucas, which ones are your favorite and least favorites?
That's really tough because I don't really have, I would say, like a particular number one game. I do have a whole bunch of favorites though, and they kind of spring to mind at random intervals. Considering we talked about Gran Turismo earlier, I would say that Gran Turismo 2 is still that game defined my childhood as far as I'm concerned. That game, it had such fantastic music. It had such good customization. It had basically an endless selection of vehicles in terms of, having a PS1 game of 600 different cars. It's kind of more than, for anyone to sort of take in. And, driving games are something that I always stick with. And I'll always argue in the favor of driving games design and how unique they are compared to other mediums. Or other genres, rather. In terms of other favorite games, absolutely love Halo 2. In terms of its multiplayer experiences, I love 007 Nightfire. When I try to think about games that aren't my favorite specifically for nostalgia reasons, I'd say probably stuff like Metal Gear Solid 3 comes to mind, because that's something that I came into years and years later when I was an adult and had no experience with as a child. And it's a game from, 2004 that got updated in 06, and yet that game, I was hooked from beginning to end through that experience. And I love it when you can get those timeless experiences and experience those games that, regardless of age, regardless of their context, if you just give them a resolution buff, that's all they need for you to get back into them.
Personally, I really enjoyed the Sly Cooper franchise and the Ratchet and Clank franchise. I was a big fan of those two.
Yeah, no, the PlayStation 2, I mean, that console sold so well. I mean, I think I think I was one of the few consoles that sold over 100 million in total. Like, I think that's the only console that has more units than the Wii. In terms of games, it absolutely ruled. And in terms of platformers, like, it had the big three. It had Sly Cooper, Ratchet and Clank, and Jak and Daxter.
Oh yeah, Jak and Daxter's another one, but I wasn't that huge on it. I really liked the SpongeBob games that came out on the PS2 as well, because I was a big SpongeBob fan as a kid. What got you into like the game reviews, and what was your first ever game review you made?
Oh dear Lord, I did really awful imitations. I'm gonna say they were just flat out ripoffs of GameSpot content when I was a kid. I felt really bad because there was a YouTuber, I believe his name was Burn Your Honda. Yeah, I think that was him. And I completely ripped off his Counter-Strike review. He called me out on it, and it was completely justified. But that was me being a fucking, teenage idiot at that point. And that's something I look back on and kind of like see sort of my naivety and kind of try to see the positive of going through that rough patch to get to where I am later. So I think one of the reasons that I'm proud of the content that I'm currently doing now is that, there were years and years and years and years of doing the crap that led to it and ironing out all the kinks and trying to figure out what my voice was. Like, even as far late as the first couple years later videos I did, I was still trying to figure out my voice. And I think that really comes through in terms of the tone of the different videos. Like, the Halo Reach video is a lot more snarky and sarcastic, and that was me kind of trying to experiment with that compared to the 4 and 5 videos that were a lot more down to earth and a lot more based on what my current goals are now, which is much more based on having people understand your perspective as opposed to agree with it or see it as objective.
Oh, I found Burn Your Honda. Does he have 800 subscribers?
I think so. It might. Yeah, that's what I think his channel name was. Burn Your Honda. But yeah, he used to do some havoc. Yep, nope, that's him. That's definitely, I ripped that guy off. Burn Your Honda and the Unlikely Chance You Listen to This, I ripped you off. I was that dude. I'm so sorry. Like, I feel bad about that to this day. But that's sort of a course that the value when you're starting out in YouTube is trying to figure out what your voice is. And I feel like as long as you improve from that, as long as you improve from ripping people off or copying just to experiment with your voices and stuff like that, that is worth it. And I don't see, like, I've seen, whenever I see people, rip off content or whatever, I only get frustrated when it's like an adult and they very clearly understand what they're doing. And there's a big difference as well between taking a sentence or two and sort of like experimenting with it and ripping off entire sectors of a video. Because like, what I feel really fucking bad for was in my Titanfall video, I did spoiler alert and did the alarm and a car with a big spoiler icon, just like Extra Credits and Razorfist did. And I feel really bad about that to this day, even though part of me is like, what's the big deal? It's just a fucking alarm. I highly doubt either of those people came up with it either, but it's just the fact that I had an opportunity to do something different and took the lazy route. And that's something that I try to always avoid at all costs these days.
Absolute scum.
I mean, that's how I feel when I see that section. I'm just like, oh, come on. Really? You were too lazy to come up with a new way of saying spoiler alert? Fuck off.
And when'd you make your first game review?
I think that was, I'd say probably 2009, 2009. That was around there. That's when I changed my content and the type of stuff that I was doing.
How long does it take for you to make a game review from start to finish?
Depends on the content. It depends on something like, doing a So I Finally Played on Quantum Break is a lot easier than a hour-long breakdown on the Orange Box, where you've got 5 different games that you're talking about and you've got multiple development cycles and all under the same company that's already really secretive to begin with and trying to dig up information and stuff like that. So it always depends on the video and the content. though I would say the reason why I sort of give myself the buffer of 2 videos every month, which roughly goes to every 2 weeks. The reason I give that is because that sort of gives me a sort of safety net to ensure that whether the video is 10 minutes long or an hour long, that there's a point to it, that there's some value to it, and that there is a message and intent behind it. And it's not just like, hey, you know, here's some filler content, you know, here's just some crap, here's something that was just off the top of my head or whatever. You know, I never want to do stuff like, the reason I do Q&As at the end of my video is because I don't want to put stuff like that as a video on my channel. I basically want the setup that someone can go to any of the videos on anywhere on my page and get something out of it, hopefully. You know, kind of the meaningless crap, the fluff, that's kind of like reserved for my Twitter page. Well, I'll just, you know, I'll joke around and I'll post, you know, random memes or random jokes and stuff like that. Or I'll post a particularly funny glitch in a game, because that to me is a lot more fitting to that platform. I kind of want my channel on YouTube to sort of be its own little network, I guess, in terms of, so it's just like, hey, because the reason I started the channel in the first place is after I got out of university and I did my final, I basically wanted to start fresh. I wanted a completely clean slate. And that first Call of Duty video I did, that was basically me saying, okay, this is going to be the bar. Any video from here is not going to be any worse than this from here on out.
Lucas, which game review that you've made so far has taken you the longest amount of time to make and shortest amount of time to make?
Longest orange box, fastest, probably the DLC video, because that was something that was generated entirely from playing Battlefield 1 and feeling and having this conflicting experience of enjoying it yet feeling like there should be something more behind it, and trying to figure out what that feeling was. And when I thought back to my experiences with Battlefield 3 and how me and my friends would get excited at every trailer of a new DLC and realizing that was the difference. And then orange box for the obvious, you know, for it being the 5 games in one package.
And which game review has been your favorite and least favorite to make?
To make, that's because that's a distinction, because in terms of favorite videos, that's going to differ as well. Probably my favorite to make, I think that's either, because there's lots of videos that were a pain in the ass to make that I ended up being satisfied with. But probably the most fun to make was probably, I would say, honestly, like the Warframe video was fun. The most recent one I did, the Warframe video was a lot of fun because of that was an experience of being able to collaborate with people. The Orange Box video was fun for that same reason, because, you know, it had Shammy, it had Mandalore, it had Red Angel. That's been a blast. Being able to work with other content creators is fun. I think probably the most fun though was Spec Ops. Weird considering the game's subject matter, but Spec Ops was fun because that was the first time I ever did a multiplayer session with viewers and worked with them. And the part that was so much fun about that was not only joking with the people, because that was a really fun time with that shitty broken game multiplayer wise, but the fun of it was doing something that I wasn't even able to do in the past. Like had I broken down Spec Ops around the same time as Halo, there's no way I would have been able to cover multiplayer. And doing something that not even I could have done without an audience before, that was really satisfying.
And before I ask this question, just to make sure if it's a valid question or not, do you still write for COG Connected or not anymore?
No. I was working while I was producing those Halo videos, so those Halo videos were kind of my send-off anyways with the COG content. I just didn't have the time to micromanage both parties. And yeah, after Halo 5, I left. And we ended on good terms. Like, they completely understood. The person that brought me on board, he's moved on too. He's now got a job in video games PR, which is awesome because it's something that, you know, he's been wanting to cover games for most of his life. So yeah, no, that was a decision that was with a lot of intent behind it, and it was, I think, the right decision, because the reason I left is because what I didn't want was people confusing the site with me. You know, because those Halo videos were a lot of people's introduction to that channel, and there's a lot of confusion in terms of people mistaking me for COG Connected. My favorite moment I ever had was on my Halo 5 video. There's a comment that said, "You're just trying to rip off COG Connected." And I just replied to him, "Hey, can you look at the credits?" And he went, "Oh, sorry, I just looked at the title and thumbnail and assumed." And yeah, so I feel like that was the right decision for both of us. The thing about it is that my channel's grown since then, the site has grown since then, so I feel like that was the right decision for both parties.
All right then, Lucas, now we'll move on to the Twitter questions we got here. I picked 6 out of the bunch, and the first one here's from Squid the Sid. He's asking favorite YouTubers that do similar content.
Super Bunny Hop. That's my go-to because that channel was probably the biggest inspiration for the content I do now, mainly in his, not even his specific format, because I think we've got pretty different styles, but in terms of, because what he did essentially was bring narrative to a game review or games coverage. And that's something I kind of try to do as well. I try to, whenever you're covering a game, you try to tell the story about it. So rather than just telling you, hey, Warframe is this free-to-play PC shooter that became on consoles later, blah, 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 you kind of try to set up a narrative, hey, this game 5 years ago steered me away and now it engaged me. Why is that? And that's a question for both myself and the audience, and that kind of hopefully engages them for the rest of the video.
Yeah, I don't watch Super Bunny Hop a whole lot. I mainly watch you, Mandy, and Avery or Shammy. Those are like my go-tos for game reviews, but I'm familiar with Super Bunny Hop and Matthew Matoses and those guys as well.
Yeah, and yeah, I love Shammy and Mandalore's content, and I would say that even if I didn't know or talk to them, it's they got really unique styles, and that is what brings their audiences. They go to them because their content stands out from everyone else doing gaming content.
This one's from FabinTube, and he's asking, how does it feel to be a Halo YouTuber that doesn't make Halo content, but is still labeled that sometimes because you made some videos a few years ago?
Oh, Favin, Favin, or Favin. I don't consider myself... I honestly don't even remember the last time I was labeled a Halo YouTuber by anybody. I find that's something I don't actually run into in my experiences. And I mean, if some people see me as a Halo YouTuber, that's fine. I mean, but to me, like, it's just the kind of thing where I don't think people say it because, people wouldn't call me a Spec Ops YouTuber. People wouldn't call me a Mass Effect YouTuber. So I don't really run into that personally.
Yeah, because your channel isn't like dedicated to Halo content. You just made like a few Halo videos. That doesn't mean you're a Halo YouTuber.
Yeah, that just got my start kind of thing.
This one's from Dash Trade Cultist. He's asking, did you go to college? If so, did your degree in any way prepare you for this? Or are you like Grande and actually just a doctor or something?
I went to Capilano University and I took a documentary studies course. And I was originally going to go to the proper full motion picture and arts class, but that fell through. And what I didn't realize at the time is that it was a bit of a blessing in disguise, because when you're starting out in the first year of film, it's a lot of theory. As in, there's a lot of writing, there's a lot of scripts, there's a lot of talking about technicals and stuff like that. Whereas in documentary, you kind of do a little bit of everything. You do some hands-on stuff, you do some directing, you do some writing, you do all that kind of stuff. You do a little bit of business, you do some producing. And that was a better fit for me. The main takeaway for university for me is that I wouldn't say, like, I definitely learned things, don't get me wrong, but I don't think it, like, blew my mind away with what I didn't suddenly have a big thing of knowledge. What I came away with was maturity, because at that point I went from, doing some high school courses or whatever to having to travel by myself, do projects on my own, talk to people on my own, that kind of thing. And that was the main takeaway from university, was that it forced me to rely on myself and work with other people effectively.
This one's from Master Niklas. He's asking, is there any game franchise or singular game you want to see get another game or be rebooted/remastered?
I want Burnout back. I miss it. Burnout Revenge is one of my all-time favorite games. 3 Takedown is fantastic. Paradise is great too, but I'm not quite as good as those other 2 games. But yeah, that's a franchise. I really think EA dropped the ball when they got Criterion to just move them to Need for Speed. Like, I get it that Need for Speed was a more popular brand than Burnout, but the way it used to work is that Need for Speed had its own sector and Burnout had its own sector. And when Criterion took over, it became this sort of Frankenstein mishmash of both.
Yeah, I never played Burnout, but I did play Need for Speed. I think I played the one on the PS4. Let me see if I can find the name of it.
Rivals.
Yeah, that was the one. Yeah.
Yeah, and and Criterion, I'm not even sure if they did anything recently, if they've been shut down, but Criterion, they announced it. They showed like a pre-alpha of a game at E3 once. And cars were untextured and they didn't even tell the premise of the game, but it was just it was this one that had a mixture of buggies, ATVs, and crazy jumps, and it looked like a lot of fun. And I haven't heard anything from them since, so I don't know what's going on with that game's development or the state of Criterion. But either way, I just want Burnout back, and I think there's absolutely an opportunity for it, although it's really difficult for driving games to get off the ground these days because it is the smallest niche. like even smaller than fighting games or strategy.
This one's from Ryland Barden. He's asking, what do you think of the Battle Royale genre? And do you think it'll be oversaturated soon? I think it already is.
I like PUBG and I like Fortnite. They're not amazing games. They're not mind-blowing games, but I have my fun with them. I don't take those games particularly seriously because I think the element of luck is just too much. My main big gripe with Battle Royale right now is that I really do feel like that in the case of PUBG in particular, that when it gets down to say the fourth or fifth smallest circle, that it should airdrop cover. So like shipping containers, rocks, basically stuff to make like a little mini layout. Because the biggest problem that I think Battle Royale has is when you play a match the whole way and then you get to the end and then you just get dinged from a sniper who had a better loot drop than you. And you're in completely open cover and there's nothing you can do. I think that's really frustrating. In terms of it being oversaturated, I think Battle Royale games are going to be oversaturated. However, the thing with Battle Royale is that Favin put it best, it's a game mode and it's not a full game itself. And I think it's something that, like, here's the thing. If the next Call of Duty game has a full Battle Royale mode, which Call of Duty Online already has, it's just a mode. It's not something that's going to define the experience. If it comes into the game and then just sort of peters out in population, it's not going to be a big deal because there's still going to be a whole other chunk of the game for people to go to. So I'm not really all that concerned about Battle Royale being oversaturated. I think it's just, if anything, at worst, it's going to be a minor inconvenience.
I definitely like Fortnite more than PUBG, but I mean, what you said about getting dinked with a sniper at the end. I mean, in Fortnite, if you got enough mats, you can just build a little fort that you can hide in.
Exactly, and that's definitely a benefit that Fortnite has, is that Fortnite, even if you don't build anything, usually ends in matches with bases and teams and kind of a more thematic gameplay flow or a more grand scale. Yeah, a more balanced kind of scale, whereas PUBG, a lot of the time, it always results in you crawling through the grass, which that can be kind of cool until you just get one-shotted from someone that you can't even see because they have cover and you don't, because the blue circle of death demands it. And I feel like there's stuff that they could do to make that more satisfying for both parties.
I'm sure the person that got the kill is very happy, but the one getting killed is very upset.
Yeah, I feel like that person would have more fun having to navigate a map on the fly and having to actually, this is a very different type of game, but there's one called Due Process that's basically taking Rainbow Six Siege and adding procedurally generated maps to that format. And I think that has a lot of potential because that's going to take a formula that currently in Siege, it relies a lot on map knowledge. And so if you get rid of map knowledge and then force it more on the individual gunplay or on-the-fly strategy, I think that has a lot of potential.
I'm not a fan of Rainbow Six Siege. I think it's too slow for me, too boring.
Yeah, that's understandable. I mean, it's a game where it's very stop and start. It's a game where it can go for minutes and you're standing still and then 10 seconds where it's just crazy.
Exactly, yeah. I like games where it's just like it's action all the time, not like dragged out slow games. They bore me.
Yeah, that's something that I think one of the things about Siege is that its casual mode kind of has a sort of no-win scenario where ranked is more interesting because in ranked you have 3 minutes to attack as opposed to 4 minutes, and that 1 minute difference is all it takes to have a lot less downtime. And because what it results in is that in casual, what attackers do is just sit back waiting to pick people off one by one, whereas in ranked they can't really do that. They have to make a push.
I mean, I have a friend that loves Siege, but me, no, I just hop in and team kill and I'm happy.
Oh, you're one of those people. One of the people I hit report toxic on.
Yeah, I am one of those people because that's what brings me enjoyment in that game. The last one here is from Little B Gaming. He's asking, do you have a backup plan if something goes wrong with YT besides suicide? I'm kidding, that wasn't part of it.
Caught off my legs? Nah. I'd probably just go back to trying to do normal work. Yeah, in terms of a plan, no, I don't really have a backup plan in terms of, I'm just seeing how long this road takes me. I already have a bit of a safety net. It's not like if the next video fails, I'm going to be on the street. I'm doing okay. I've got people that support me. I've got, a bit of money saved up. I'm hardly rich. You don't really get rich from doing essays. If you wanted to get rich on gaming content, don't go to making essays. But
go to Fortnite content.
Yeah, exactly. Go to Fortnite content, go to streaming. But I've got some safety there and stuff like that. So I'm just seeing where this road takes me.
Hopefully you'll be the next PewDiePie.
I don't want to be the next PewDiePie. I don't feel like dealing with news companies up my ass all the time because they want my money.
Oh yeah, no, that's not good. But I mean, you're practically best friends with Felix, you know?
Oh yeah, no, we did some video. We were on the same channel, so we're friends.
Exactly, yeah.
Felix, call me up, you bastard. Give me back my YouTube money.
Make a video dick sucking PewDiePie and be like, Felix, we know each other. We're best mates. Please just follow me on Twitter.
Come on, man. Like, you don't remember me? You don't remember me as the reviewer who did those shitty copies of IGN and GameSpot? Come on.
I mean, best mate Pyrocynical follows you on Twitter, so, he's best mates with fucking PewDiePie.
That's true.
So you've got your route to getting to PewDiePie. You're well on your way there.
Yeah, I'm on a set course.
All right, then, Lucas, this is the last question of the interview, and then that'll be it. So with your channel this year, what new and different things do you plan on doing?
I've got a much more personal video right now in the works, and I've got some ideas in the future of involving movie content, but not in a way that is I think it's going to be a much more interesting gimmick for viewers. I can tell you right now, it's not just going to be me reviewing movies. I feel like I enjoy breaking down games a lot more, but it's going to be bringing film into the context of games in a way that I hope will interest people. And if it doesn't, oh well, it's just another idea to throw to the wall. But now I'm looking forward to showing it and working on it in the future.
You could collaborate with I Hate Everything.
I mean, if the opportunity presents itself, I'll love to do that. That'd be awesome.
Or like Why Master, Ralph the Movie Maker, or any of those.
Yeah, no, collaborating with people on content, it's fun. And I do enjoy the few times that I've done it.
Yeah, I mean, that's all I literally do. All right, then, well, that's it, Lucas. I appreciate you coming on, man.
All right, well, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, no problem. All right, then, that's it, everyone. If you have enjoyed the interview, you can go ahead and drop me a like, drop me a sub, and, leave a comment down below. Anything you could do to help would be appreciated. Otherwise, thank you for watching. I'll see you next one. Take care, and goodbye.